I flew all the way from Ottawa last night, actually yesterday afternoon, so I appreciate it. First of all, thank you so much for having me here today. The guy that you were seeing on the screen, that photo of me that was taken, I think the day before I was sworn in as Minister of Infrastructure and Communities in November of 2015. So now you look at me today, right? So you can tell the difference, right? Less hair, right? More gray hair. But anyways, I do want to acknowledge by showing my deepest appreciation that we are gathered here on the traditional territory of the Lheidli nation and the people who have welcomed us all to this land. I'm pretty sure by now you might have figured out by my accent that I was not born in this country. As someone who came to this country from somewhere else, I have been able to build my life in this country and have been able to build my family's life in this country. And many like you, whether you came here like me as an immigrant or your parents, grandparents, or their parents and grandparents came to this country, with the exception of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, all of us have come to this land from somewhere else. And all of us have been able to work hard and build our lives here. So I always take the moment to show my gratitude to Indigenous peoples who have been so generous and welcoming, and sometimes by not choice, to allow us to be here and build our lives. And I just wanted to really start by acknowledging and showing my appreciation for that. You know, you have been talking about sustainable development. Our government has been focused from the day we got elected to make sure that our economy grows in a way that everyone is able to participate, that everyone is able to make sure that they succeed in this country. So whether we were lowering taxes for the middle class, or we were making changes to the Canada Child Benefit to provide support to families with children, or giving more money for seniors so they can retire in comfort, or growing our economy in a sustainable way, that natural resources that have been a source of well-paying middle-class jobs for Canadians for centuries will remain a source of well-paying middle-class jobs for decades to come. That is my responsibility as a Minister of Natural Resources, and that's the topic that I will be discussing in our Q&A session. But so I won't take too much time here on the podium. I just finally want to thank each and every one of you for the work you are doing in your field. Because as Canadians, when we work together, as a country, when we work together, we always end up achieving results that help each and every one of us to succeed. So with those words, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to the conversation. My staff gave me a bundle full with the pages, but I always try to be as unscripted as possible. And I will try to be as unscripted as possible, even though my staff is recording what I'm saying, right? So they can go through that later on and try to correct me. But so far I think I've been fine, right? So, okay, thank you.
Thanks so much for doing this. Thank you, Minister. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
So folks, just for those of you standing in the cheap seats at the back, there's lots of empty seats over here. Don't be shy or awkward. People here won't make you feel too badly if you want to sneak around there. You won't distract us.
Why don't we move? You come here, I'll come there. I can see you.
Well, it doesn't matter which one. You want to sit here? I don't care.
Sure.
Okay. See, I'm a Winnipeg boy. You're born to please people when you're from the prairies.
It's afternoon, right? So you had a heavy lunch, and we got to make sure everybody's active, right? So
Yeah, well, it's true, actually. There's fewer people when you're looking this way. That's
we'll change again.
Oh, God. We don't have that much time, and we don't. So let me dive into a few things. So, folks, thank you. First of all, quick shout out and thanks to Dan and Sarah and the rest of the incredible team who once again are organizing this conference. It's a pleasure, it's an honor for them to ask me to play a small role again this year. Very, very important in my view that we keep very, very clear the link between the economy and the livelihood of those of us who reside in the Lower Mainland and those of you who are the critical part of the economy that drives so much of what we do down the Lower Mainland. So my thanks again for including me in my capacity at the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade. I do have a series of questions for the Minister, and I'll be candid, I could run the clock on the whole list of stuff I have in front of me, but this is so much more meaningful when we engage all of you in the audience, so please do use Pigeonhole. I'm going to go through probably 2 or 3 questions that I have here, and then I'm going to look to what we have in Pigeonhole. And if there's a lack of questions, then I can just keep going. So we'll kind of put it to you, ladies and gentlemen. So please help drive the conversation. We've got this wonderful opportunity with the Minister. So with that said, let's get right into it. You were appointed into your new role at the end of August 28th, I think was the date you were sworn into your new role, or something
July 15th.
July 15th, so even a little longer than that. So you've had a chance to kind of figure out the basic lay of the land. It's a very, very complex ministry.
Yeah.
Let me start with kind of a broad question for you. So last year, calendar 2018, we had lots of highs and lows in the energy sector. We saw the positive final investment deal in LNG Canada, which I'll come back to in just a moment. But we also saw oil production cuts. We saw plummeting oil prices. As you look forward from this point, having had a chance to get settled into the role, what is your vision for the development of our natural resources in this country?
You know, I am from Alberta. I have lived in Alberta for 34 years, and I have seen how difficult life has been for the last number of years, particularly those who work in the oil and gas sector. As I said earlier, you know, Canada has an advantage when it comes to our natural resources. The prosperity that we see in our country and the jobs that we have seen, well-paying jobs as well, right? That natural resources have been a source of prosperity for Canada. So when one part of your country struggles, everyone feels the pain. And that's what we have seen over the last number of years. So my role in this portfolio is to make sure that how we move forward in a way that allows us to continue to get our resources to markets, but also explore new markets. We have to explore new markets, and we also need to do the development in a sustainable way, in a way that it has the confidence of the Canadians. It has the confidence of Indigenous communities, that we're listening to their voices, that we are including them in their decision-making process. And the challenges that we have seen, absolutely many are related to things that we don't control and related to the oil prices and the prices of natural gas and other products in forestry and in mining. But there are things that we control. The things we control is how we develop what we have and how we include communities in that development. And that's my role to, so sustainable development of natural resources with full participation of Canadians and the full participation of Indigenous communities is something that I'm completely committed to doing so.
So let me pull on that thread just a little bit. You talk about the things that you can control. One of the things that you can control, of course, as government is legislation.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you inherited in your file was Bill C-69.
Yeah.
And there's some concerns around that, as I know you're aware, but to summarize the three main ones: increase of complexity and litigation risks, no timeline certainty in terms of there's no hard caps on the processes involved in analysis of projects, and then very little or no mention or consideration of upside economic impact. Now, I wanted to give you a chance to address those concerns. Are they warranted? What are your views and thoughts on the concerns that exist around C-69?
No, I appreciate that question because this issue has been raised by many stakeholders, partners in the industry, and in the people I interact with in my portfolio. The purpose of Bill C-69 is to fix a process that has not worked for us. In 2012, when the changes were made under the legislation that was brought in by the previous government, it really eroded the Canadians' confidence in the regulatory process when government took the ability of the Canadians to participate in the regulatory process. It also eroded the confidence because legislative changes were made that took the ability away to protect our water, waterways, the protection of fish, and all those things have led to erosion of their confidence. The purpose of Bill C-69 is to restore their confidence. It is also to make sure that good projects move forward in a way that they are done with keeping in mind that it should be one review process for one project instead of having multiple regulatory processes applied to that particular projects. In fact, timelines are short, right? In fact, in this new legislation, there is emphasis on economic benefits of resource development. In the current process, there is no reference whatsoever to economic or social or community benefits. It's all focused on environmental protection or the adverse impact on the environment of resource development. So we are making the regulatory review process. Having said that, that does not mean that the legislation cannot be improved. So what we are suggesting our stakeholders to do is that please engage with the Senate at this time. That's where the legislation is. And the Senate will go through the hearings, they will listen to the concerns, and they will make appropriate amendments that we will be open to considering. We already considered more than 100 amendments to the legislation during the committee hearings. We'll be open to more legislations because at the end of the day, our goal is to make sure that we are continuing to develop our resources in a responsible sustainable manner. If you allow me for 1 minute, right? The comparison I want to make is that there are many people in this room who will remember the confrontational situation that we used to see in our forestry sector, when people were chaining themselves to trees and trying to stop logging operations or stopping the forestry sector from development.
Yeah, I lived through that in the
right?
90s. Yeah.
That happened because there was so much polarization among the Canadians. Because we were not able to convince Canadians that we can actually develop our forestry sector resources in a responsible way. But now look at where the industry is. It is growing, it's developing, and communities are supporting it. Communities actually bought into that idea of sustainable development of forestry. But why can't we have the same thing for oil and gas? That is my goal. I think we can, if we depoliticize this whole process, if we reduce the polarization that we are seeing, particularly on pipeline projects, I think we can achieve that. That's the purpose of Bill C-69, but we only do that when we actually bring people together to achieve their collective shared goal. And that's what I'm focused on. That's why I'm confident Bill C-69 will allow us to do that, because it's about balance of different interests.
So engage the Senate process,
Yes.
and you're open to hearing of some changes.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned the protests, and I'll stick with that theme for just a moment. Obviously, top of mind for many is the Wet'suwet'en situation over the last couple of weeks, obviously quite concerning. And in light of those recent protests related to Coastal GasLink and a project that thought it was checking all the boxes, all the regulatory requirements, that situation, I think, for a lot of people in this room demonstrates the uncertainty that proponents still face when they're trying to get a project across the finish line in this country. And it's not the first project that highlights that gap. So they're asking for more guidance, is what I sense. The proponents are asking for more guidance with respect to Indigenous consultation. So my question to you would be twofold. What advice would you give companies as they try to reconcile what they've seen in the last couple of weeks with their go-forward plans and strategies? And then what is the government's role in assisting companies in this regard with respect to getting to yes?
Well, if you look at some of the projects that have gone through challenges, look at the Northern Gateway Pipeline. It was not the proponent that did not do the job. It was not the engagement of the proponent with communities. It was the failure of the government to meet its constitutional obligation for a meaningful consultation and engagement with indigenous communities. Same thing happened with Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. It was not that Kinder Morgan was doing something wrong. Again, court has been very, very clear on Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion that there was two deficiencies, and both are related to governments. One was that when the review started, NEB should have included the impact of marine shipping on the marine environment as part of the assessment. They failed to do that, not the proponent's fault, government's fault. The other deficiency they identified was that government did not meaningfully consult with indigenous peoples, that we did not meet our constitutional obligation, Crown's obligation. Again, government's fault. I think what we need to do, and I hope that you get a chance to reflect upon the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion court ruling, because it does give us a path forward too, like what governments need to do. And that's exactly what we are engaged in. Like, what is meaningful dialogue? Meaningful dialogue is that when you sit across the table from someone, you listen to their concerns. And then you try to engage them in a meaningful way, sincere conversation, that issues that have been identified, you offer solutions to those issues. And you make serious attempt to offer solutions, to offer accommodations. That did not happen in case of TMX, and that did not happen in case of Northern Gateway Pipeline. But on the issue of the specific project you're talking about, on the coastal gas line, proponent has worked really, really hard to negotiate benefit agreements that last the life of the project. With every First Nation on the route, and I understand there's a dispute around hereditary chiefs and all that. I think the role we need to play as a federal government is to build the capacity of the indigenous communities to fully participate, give them the necessary resources, and let them decide who needs to be on the table instead of government deciding who needs to be on the table. But our role is to build that capacity that they are able to fully participate in the process.
So it's not that the proponents don't need to do anything new, it's the dialogue and the capacity?
I think there are, I'm not saying that every proponent is a good proponent. There are a number of proponents that don't do a good job. There are a number of proponents who do very good job. I think just engaging and learning from best practices in the industry is always a good thing. But the point I'm trying to make is that governments have fallen short on the expectations of Canadians, and we have fallen short on the expectation what is legally required for us to move forward on those projects.
So we'll come back to Trans Mountain in a minute, because I'm going to go to your questions now. I got a few more here, but there's a lot of overlap between what I see up on the board. The first one actually has to do with most votes so far. It speaks to Trans Mountain, actually. It's speaking of, the question actually phrase, how many Indigenous groups have changed their stance on Trans Mountain to support from opposition as a result of the work you have been leading? So why don't I'll broaden that for you just a wee bit. And because the question I had was really just looking for an update from your perspective as to where we're at on the whole thing. What's the pathway forward? What have you learned? You've touched on some of that already. So I'll broaden the question a wee bit for you. Take us where you will on Trans Mountain, speaking specifically to...
So the decision of the federal court came on August 30th. Yep. And we had a number of options to respond. One of them was to appeal the decision. And we decided not to appeal because it takes too much time for the appeal process to conclude, number of years, 2 to 3 years. And the other option was that we actually comply what court has asked us to do, and that's the path we have taken. So since then, we have instructed the NEB to undertake the review of the marine shipping, and that will be concluded by February 22nd, and they will report to my department with the new recommendations. On the consultation, we have 8 teams as we speak, engaging with the indigenous communities. These teams are properly trained. and they have a proper mandate. In the last consultation, our teams did not have the mandate to actually offer accommodations. Now we have given them the mandate to offer accommodations and also come back to us with what they're hearing and what more we can do as a government to offer further accommodation to those concerns. So that is undertaking. As far as how many new groups are supporting the TMX projects, we are not. At this time, our focus is to engage with all of them. There are 117 indigenous groups on the route from Edmonton all the way to Burnaby, and we are engaging with all of them. And we are making every effort to listen to their concerns and make sure that they feel that they have been heard. And once that process will be concluded, we'll be in a better position to state how many people are supporting and how many people are not. But regardless of that, I think what we need to do as a government in order to move forward on this project in the right way is to make every effort to resolve the outstanding issues and also be very, very clear that there will be issues that we will not be able to resolve. Mm-hmm. And in those cases where we cannot resolve the issues, make sure the communities understand why we cannot resolve the issues and give them the reasons that we cannot. And this is not about a group having a veto over the project. That's absolutely not the case, but it's making sure that they understand where we can and where we cannot offer accommodation.
So I'm getting the hook here to start wrapping up, but I want to stay with the theme just for a second. Your province is hurting. Yeah. I've been going to Calgary several times a year for my entire career. Edmonton once or twice a year. But I've never seen the mood in Alberta where people are both angry and frightened. I've never seen that. Getting this resolved, in my thinking, knowing a little bit about the timelines here, based on what you know, will you see some sort of closure on the process so that you can catch the construction window for this year and actually start getting shovels in the ground on your side of the Rocky Mountains?
So I absolutely understand the frustration. I have family members who work in the energy sector. I live there. I breathe there. I hear and feel the frustration each and every day. But I have a fundamental responsibility in this role to get this right. And I try to stress that point to the people that I interact with in the industry, in the community, is that we cannot afford to fail on this project again. We failed once. If we try to make shortcuts, which we tried to do in the past, we will fail. We owe it to Canadians. We owe it to thousands of workers who work in the energy sector that we are able to expand our global market, that we're able to reduce our dependency on a single customer that we have, the United States. 99% of oil from Alberta is exported to the United States, 99%. That has been the case for the last 15 to 20 years. That is the case today.
At a very big discount.
A big discount. We have only one customer. It is important that we have customers other than the United States. In order to do that, building that pipeline capacity is fundamentally important, but we need to do it right.
So I'm going to
get. It may take a little longer. It may take longer. We're not starting from scratch. Let me be absolutely clear. Yeah. We have a lot of information that was gathered under the previous consultation by TMX, and we are gathering more information. And court has given us a direction that we can conclude meaningful discussion in a focused, efficient manner. That's what we are doing as we speak. What do we need to get this right? We owe it to Canadians. We owe it to workers. We owe it to our energy sector. We just cannot cut corners on this project, and we will not cut corners on this.
So I want you to wrap it up for the audience to touch on the relationship between Alberta and British Columbia. Yeah. I want to remind you, you already know this, I'm sure, but the polling data around the pipeline and support for that pipeline project is very strong. It's over 2-to-1 almost throughout British Columbia, including, I have to emphasize, in Lower Mainland, right? So there is more politics at play here than public support. Public support is there to make sure that this gets over the line responsibly and following the guidelines that you've articulated. So what are your thoughts about what can we do with respect to getting Alberta and British Columbia working together?
I think the lesson that I have learned from the the Federal Court of Appeal decision, that in order for us to move forward on large energy infrastructure projects, so we can continue to grow our economy, we can continue to create jobs, we have to take action on the climate. We need to tackle the issue of climate change. We cannot continue to ignore the devastating impact that climate change is having on our communities and reducing the impact of the resource development on the environment. Absolutely, we have to do it. Otherwise, we will not be able to move forward. The third component is that what Canada has done to Indigenous communities is shameful. And we need to correct that. And part of that is make sure that we are engaging with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities on these specific routes in a meaningful two-way dialogue, listening to their concerns and respecting their rights, their title, and making sure that they are partners in this development, not just stakeholders. They're true partners in this conversation, in this moving forward together, that they also see the benefits, receive the benefits of that development. I did three things: resource development, continue to create jobs, environmental sustainability and action, and meaningful inclusion of Indigenous communities in the decision-making process.
So we're going to have to wrap it up there. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the Minister.